I don't usually play a lot of narrative first board game designs, but over the last 6 or so weeks, I've been playing not one, not two, but 3 different types of board games where the narrative function is the primary mechanic of the game. And these 3 board games felt like the best iteration of some video games that give me a little bit of nostalgia and were really popular at the time that they were released. Or some were cult classics. But what we're doing today in this video is I'm comparing 3 board games that succeeded in being the best representation of a board game that gives the same feeling as 3 well-known video games, including Animal Crossing, Zelda Breath of the Wild, or other point-and-click adventures like Curse of the Obra Dinn, Heavy Rain, and others. So stick around to find out which board games these are. Hello everybody and welcome to the Boardgaymergirl channel. If you're new here, my name is Natalie and I like to talk about all things board games, but from a primarily solo perspective. Today we're looking at 3 different board games that give the same vibalicious feeling of 3 video games that I remember. Or, well, 2 video games and a style of video game that I remember. The 3 games that we're going to be doing in this video are Cozy Stickerville, Witchbound, and Vantage. Before going further, I do want to mention that I was given review copies for Cozy Stickerville and Vantage, but I did purchase Witchbound myself. So this video came about because I somehow realized I was playing 3 different types of similar mechanical games over the last 6 to 8 weeks, but they all had their own very distinct style that mimicked video games that I either remembered or watched people stream that were popular, because my video game ability is that of Jim Halpert in The Office playing Call of Duty and just constantly running into a wall and not knowing what's going on. So a lot of the times, the way that I would most enjoy video games is watching someone else play the hard stuff while I get to see the story. So narrative board games are probably the best connection to video games for me in general. I'm not necessarily super combat heavy a person in either kind of style, board games or video games, but I digress. This video, I'm going to go over each of the board games that I'm covering, and then I'm going to go into the video game that I'm thinking the board game best represents and mention a little bit of that, and then show you the connection as to why I think these board games are the best iterations that video games have gone to so far before they get to a point where they would need to be digitized to be more helpful in experience. Because the whole reason I got into board games was to stay away from screens. Then by the end of this video, I'm of course going to do a little bit of a solo analysis for each of the 3 board games that I'm talking about today. So without further ado, I will get into this board game analysis of Cozy Stickerville. So Cozy Stickerville is a cozy game, obviously. It is kind of a free-for-all of doing what you want at the pace that you want. You don't feel rushed. It feels relaxing for the most part. And while you can play 1 to 6 players, I've only played it up to 2 to 3 players at this point. And I would think that 6 players would be a lot. It is a cooperative game, so a lot of the decisions you're making together as you're going through 10 years of gameplay. The main loop of the game is that you're playing through 10 different years. You're given this amount of land, which is your board, and it's a bare landscape where you're given 10 years to kind of build this landscape up into your own little village and town and try to make it successful. Again, it's almost like you're just given land and just see what you do with it based on different events that happen. So while there isn't necessarily something you have to do, every day you will be flipping cards. I believe there's 12 in 1 year and you're doing 10 years of this. every day you're flipping a card from this deck and you're met with a different choice. So you'll have an event where it's kind of like, do you want to get trees or do you want to get food? And then whatever your choice is, you'll read the answer, get those tokens or a card from a different item card deck or a sticker from the sticker book and put them out in your own area or on the map. Then every day you'll also get an action where you can free-for-all do whatever you want. So you'll have different cards that are out for a duration of time. You'll have different people or places on your board game map that have different story sections that you can go and read and therefore make choices from that. You'll have new visitors to town, you'll build houses, you'll build buildings, libraries, all these different things. As you build out your town, there will be certain crisis moments where you might have to do something. You'll also have puzzles and mysteries to solve. And the game also has points where, depending on what you did in earlier chapters, those things might come back to haunt or do good for you. I don't know what the opposite of haunt or hurt is, but there are, anyways. But the whole point is you're just going on the journey. There's not necessarily a point other than the experience of building out this village for yourself, and it's a less stressful way to do things. The only stressful thing, I think, is having to peel the stickers out of the sticker book and then trying to place it on the board. I'll get a little bit more into my thoughts on that. But now let's get into Animal Crossing, the video game comparison to this board game. I feel over the last few years, as the cozy side genre of board games has started to grow significantly, that there are a lot of comparisons to Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing, which feel like the epitome of video game cozy. And they were incredibly popular during their rise or time that they came out. I mean, I will say Animal Crossing came out during the pandemic, so nobody had anything to do. Well, some people, I was a nurse at the time, but everyone got Animal Crossing and a Nintendo Switch and played that great game like crazy. So that video game, you're doing a similar thing where you land on an island and you're helping to build that island up. There's no rush, the vibe is cozy, it's relaxed, you can do what you want, and you're free to customize your island in certain ways, like your house. As you go through things, you'll start off slow by, say, picking up a whole bunch of sticks off the island to declutter it, but to also learn how to craft objects. And you'll be able to catch different bugs and animals so that you can put them into the museum or into an encyclopedia for the island for some friend you make. But there's so much that you can do and time just flies by. And I feel like that is a similar vibe to Cozy Stickerville. It has just the exact same mimicking feeling, but it has just enough of different, I wouldn't call them missions, like different side quests you can go on, but at your own pace. And I feel like both of these games do that the best. And I feel most board games that do that comparison either fall short with that legacy aspect of certain things affecting the gameplay. Like it didn't really matter what you did. Nothing actually changed that, except maybe a stick here or an apple there or whatever. And not that Animal Crossing has a lot of that. I won't say that I finished the game, but there's different collections you grow over time, or you meet someone and they ask you to do something and you go and do that and complete that thing. And that kind of mission-oriented cozy style is exactly what Cozy Stickerville does, where you do something and depending on, say, a building you try to build, depending on which building you built, it might have an effect later on in year 4 where something happens, and if you don't have that building, something else happens. But if you do have that building, nothing happens. I am trying my best not to spoil the story or things that would happen. So there's just different types of games where I think of the narrative adventure as well. In this game, you're reading from a booklet as you meet new characters and have different tasks or choices that come up. You could even date in this game, but it's a world where little changes affect the journey, but the game itself is just an experience to go through. I also don't think it overstays its welcome. It does have 1 to 10 years of decks that you'll be going through. So I don't know, there's probably, 10 hours, 10 to 15 hours of gameplay that you'll go through, depending on how fast you move through a chapter and depending on if you're playing it yourself or co-op. The game doesn't necessarily change too much for multiplayer, but that is enough for Cozy Stickerville. I do think this is the best comparison to Animal Crossing in board game form. The only difficulty is, the sticker book, which on one hand, they are quality stickers, and the sticker book is like thick stickers that are high quality, but if trying to peel them out of the book is its own unlocked achievement if you're able to do it easily. But also there are parts in the story where they ask you to remove something, and after you've stuck it on the board, it's actually quite difficult to try to take off without it getting stuck on the board. So a lot of the time I try to almost cover it with a sticker I might not have to use later on. Otherwise, I've enjoyed my experience. I haven't finished the game yet. We are on chapter 7 of this for the one board, and then I had tried it solo as well. But that is Animal Crossing and Cozy Stickerville. So the next game actually comes from a first-time designer who is also the artist on this game, and is a game that I ended up buying myself when I first saw it in retail. But Witchbound is pretty much entirely story. So it's an ambitious game for a first-time designer, and it would be an ambitious game for just about anyone. In the game, you are Rennie and you want to live a life of adventure, but unfortunately you are too young and you have to go spend time at Grandma's house on Coven Island or Coven Cove. And Coven Cove is a place where I think there hasn't been a real witch sighting in 100 years or 1,000 years or something like that. So in this game, obviously the title is Witchbound, gives you a little hint as to Rennie's story, but you kind of discover the story as you're playing the game. And the way you play the game is very reading heavy. The art is just ridiculous, but it's very important because you'll be experiencing the board game based on different scenes, and these scenes will have different hidden numbered characters, so either speech bubbles or on objects. You'll find different numbers, and you'll have to go into your personal toolkit as you have your own character sheet, and say for if you want to look at an object, you have a 1 and an eyeball on your character sheet, or if you want to touch something, you have the number 2 next to a hand symbol on your character sheet. What you'll have to do is say there is a door and it has 23 on it and you just want to look at it first. You put the eyeball number, so 1, ahead of the door number, so 23. So you'll then take number 123, open the narrative adventure book and look for the matching passage in the narrative book, and it'll tell you how you interact with that object based on which choice you had. So if you looked at it. Now let's say you go back and you go and you touch the door, so then you look up to 23 and it will tell you another passage. And that was so interesting to me, especially where sometimes during the adventure, you're like, I wonder if they even actually have a passage if I tried to just touch this object or look at this object that you don't need to do that with. And there was still a passage in the book for that kind of interaction. It's very much you going to find these different numbers, interact with different people, places, and things, depending on your toolkit. So seeing things, touching things, but you'll also acquire new objects that you can use to interact. As it's Witchbound, you'll eventually get magic, you'll uncover story and puzzles, and just find out more about your story and the history of the Coven place. And this whole style of board game had to be heavily influenced by point and click adventures from however long ago. Like, you can go as far back as Myst, which actually scared me as a kid, where you're just wandering around this island and pointing and touching and figuring things out through that. Or things like Heavy Rain on PlayStation that I remember. It was a little bit more of a grim type of take on a narrative adventure, but you're figuring out the story by kind of being more of a detective and interacting with people, places, and objects. And then other things like the cult classic kind of video game called The Curse of the Obra Dinn. And this one, it's kind of got a graphical style that is similar to old like 8-bit kind of computer games where it's almost like a grayscale, and you go through the video game and you have still scenes of this ghost ship and how its crew disappeared or murdered or something, and you're having to point and click at things to figure out the mystery on your own. And a lot of those really good point and click video games I feel very much either inspired or are like Witchbound. And if you like those kinds of video games, you would very much find Witchbound a fun adventure. And even just with that, the curiosity of seeing how a board game format could mimic that point and click experience of a video game was just interesting to see myself. And like, the thing is yes, with such an ambitious project, there are some hiccups that, again, a board game medium might limit how you're able to point and click at things. There's a lot of heavy reading, so you're going to be spending a lot of time doing that. So while it is 1 to 2 players, you'll be reading back and forth to each other a lot. Or there are points where you've got your character sheets and there's a lot of things you have to write down as keywords or objects or inventory things, or just notes for yourself as you're going through the game, because as you interact with more people, they might open more side quests or give you information that you might want to note down. And as you go further into the game, it's more difficult to at some point get stuck or locked out. And that is more difficult to work your way back from and figure out if you're stuck or if you made a wrong move, compared to a video game where you'll typically get some NPC or some other thing that happens in the video game that gives you a hint at where you're headed to next, in the main storyline at least. Now, there is a main storyline here, but there are also just a bunch of different things you can interact with and just go into any store, find any people, interact, find conversations, their backstory, and the mysteries of this island as well. So that is Witchbound, and it is, I think, for me, it's the only board game I know that represents this type of video game style. And again, for a first-time designer or any designer that would have taken up that mantle to try to bring that game style into board games, I think well done on being able to do what you do. And with that, we come to our very last game that I'm going to be looking at today. And it was a popular one when it came out as well. I mean, Cozy Stickerville was also popular. But Vantage from Stonemaier, which took nearly a decade in development for Jamie Stegmaier to get finished. And it also weighs over 10 pounds, and it doesn't even have a miniature in the box, which is wild. When I think of board games that are really heavy, I think of they've either got, or at least have, a few miniatures and heavy, heavy cardboard. And this board game does not have that. It has, I think, like 1,300 cards and 10 different storybooks that are like 30 plus pages long, and then a rule book and one other book. But that all weighs about 10 pounds. What the big kicker is for me for this game, and one that I've been wanting people to do for years, is this isn't a campaign game. This is, you play. It is a longer experience still. I think it's like 120 to 180 minutes is what it said on BGG for playing time, and on the box, I'm sure. Yep, that's what it says on the box. It's not a campaign, and I feel like past the pandemic period of when solo gaming probably got a lot more hype because everyone was kind of stuck with whoever they were living with almost for a prolonged period of time, we had more time to play long legacy styled games that asked for a lot of time for us just for one game. And I've been hoping that as there's been burnout in that type of genre, I feel, especially even on crowdfunding, that if people took campaign games and made them into bite-sized little meals where you can complete a story and still have that experience where what I enjoy from board games is you sit down, you start and you finish and you feel completely productive because you got an entire game in. And while you can say the same thing for campaign games, that you got a session done, you're still not done the story. And there's this sense of guilt of playing other games and having to continue to go to that game. The setup, teardown for those types of games takes a lot. The miniatures in those games are just, anyways. That's its own story, and I'm going on a whole other track. And Vantage, I'm saying, is the fix to that. It is a board game that I think was needed, and to show that you can still have that kind of epic open world feel that you get from those kind of epic campaign games, and not have it be combat heavy, and also have it be a single session where every time you play the game, it's a completely new story. So, as I've taken a lot of time to go over that introduction, let me tell you a bit about how the game plays. So in Vantage, you're crash landing on a planet that no one has discovered before, and you'll be going to experience this planet and whatever adventures it has in front of you. Every adventure is different. I mean, given that there are 1,300 cards in the game, I'm sure you'll never have the same situation twice, unless you try really, really hard or don't randomize how you pick your cards. So, the main loop of the game is that you crash land on this planet, and depending on your difficulty level, you'll have different markers as, I believe, time, health, and maybe morale or something. There's 3 different markers for each player, and the game goes as long as it goes until one of those markers reaches 0. And then you'll read a passage in a storybook, and your adventure may end or not end. This game is for 1 to 6 players, and it is cooperative, so it's when one person reaches that point of 0, it could mean the end of the game for everyone, so you're all trying to work together as well. But you're individually going on your own adventure, crash landing somewhere on the planet where you can describe where you are, but no one sees your vantage point. But the main mechanic of the game is on these vantage cards, you'll be able to interact with the scene that you're presented with these different kinds of tasks. All these tasks are correlated to the 10 different storybooks, and you'll be able to go into those storybooks, read those passages, have maybe a choice or a dilemma or just something that happens based on the card that you're landing on. How you'll do this, for example, is say there's something in the distance on some rocks, and you choose the green action that says study. You can have your own idea of what that might mean, but you won't know what that word or interaction exactly means until you go read that interaction in the green storybook. How you'd find that interaction, so the study, is you'll also look on your Vantage card, which will have a certain number. In the green book, you'll match that number to a passage in it, and before you go any further into the story, you'll typically have to roll some dice or have to pay some skill tokens in order to pay for that interaction. So anytime you're doing something, you're doing some skill dice that may interact with your health, morale, or time markers on the main player board grid, if there's like a main player board. But it's also more so like a fail forward situation where something will still happen. It just depends how it affects you for journeying to find this answer. So anyways, you go and you read the passage, you studied some rocks, turns out there's nothing there, and you get some kind of skill or you get some cube or something. I am not saying anything more because I also don't want to spoil it, even though there's a high chance that you and I will not ever get the same story. That's basically how you're doing this, and it is, like Witchbound, it is an overwhelming project that to do almost a decade of work on, and seeing the intricate bits of how you need to continue to connect different stories to different pages and reference those properly. It's so large and so grand for a game that has, again, no miniatures, very little fighting if there's combat involved. I haven't really had combat myself happen so far. But the whole thing is about wandering around and just like seeing what the heck is going on. And that's the basic part. But the aspect that makes it a limited time experience for every play session is that everyone is given a mission or a destiny. So you're still given a goal just before you're let out to like frolic around in the world, where it's like pick up 2 rocks, get like a couple of people that you know, trying to be as vague as possible. And when you hit that point, you'll have to go read in a book again to see if your adventure has ended, if it continues. And that's kind of your like win or not win scenario. But it's really just about the adventure. And this game, that is why I compare it mostly to Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I did see that it looked like there was an inspiration from that video game for this board game. And for me, Vantage feels like it takes the best parts that I personally enjoyed from Zelda Breath of the Wild into this game, as I'm not a combat heavy person. Obviously, there are times where you have to do combat, but basically, I'm just running around and finding out. And like my biggest experiences were running around and crafting, going to interact and talk with like every person you can. Just, you can literally like open world adventure all the way to whoever knows, like when does this world end kind of thing. And the other thing that I really liked in Zelda Breath of the Wild was finding these little caves or like puzzle places. So you'll go and you'll do a puzzle. Sometimes there is some combat, but some of them are like really neat logic puzzles, or being able to use things in the area. So I think it's like you get like this metal power where you can pick up metal objects, and that's how you end up getting out of one room and moving into another kind of thing. Like neat things that make you feel smart for a second. And there are some things where I feel that whole vibe and ambiance of Zelda Breath of the Wild is most imagined in this, and also just the art itself feels like that whole open world thing, because Zelda Breath of the Wild, I think, was the first time that they kind of did a reimagining of Zelda games into that open world vibe, and it's become one of the more popular Zelda games that I think people know and love. And this board game is just its own special iteration of that, and I feel like it mimics that same vibe that Zelda Breath of the Wild has with an open world experience in a board game form. But unlike Zelda Breath of the Wild or other campaign games that you know of, it doesn't take 50 plus hours to finish the dang campaign and feel productive. You can do bite-sized iterations of this board game, and I think, like, I haven't had it happen once yet, but I have heard of people being able to even find each other on the planet and learn that they're in proximity with each other, which is just something that would be so cool to have happen. This obviously has hours and hours of gameplay built into it, but yeah, it surprised me. But now that I'm kind of through all of the board games and video game comparisons, I'm going to end this with saying narrative games are all about the experience, and narrative-heavy board games have sometimes a bit of a difficulty translating in a board game format compared to video games. Video games, there's no setup. You turn on the computer or your video game console and you kind of end up wherever you are. You can click things and get instant satisfaction with where you were, what you're doing, where you're moving forward. With board games, you still have that kind of set up before you can get immersed into the board game, and trying to remember or find things is tricky without any kind of digital assistance. So that is always, I feel like, going to be a downfall for that type of experience in a board game. But these three do the best at trying to get that video game feeling using the medium of board games. And these board games also, although two of them are 1 to 6 players, I would very much strongly prefer them as solo. And I think the most surprising one that that opinion would be made on is Cozy Stickerville, just because it's a legacy game where it builds up as you move through it. So going through the story with other people is fun, but as it's cooperative and no matter the amount of people, you're still just flipping up one event a day and then making a choice. I think I would prefer to go through the story and make all of my own choices and just see how I'd build out the town myself. And then, of course, Cozy Stickerville, you have 800 stickers in the box, but you only have one board and you have to flip the board and you can play one more time, but only using stickers you kind of didn't use the first time. I wish these stickers had, like Gloomhaven, I think had those where you could reuse the stickers, but I'm not sure how that would work for also quality and the cost of production for them to kind of do that for Cozy Stickerville. Vantage, I think it's really well. It is definitely more about the journey and there's the game factor to it, but it's definitely an experience, and that is similar to Witchbound as well. All of these things I think are better solo. The only thing that might be better multiplayer is if you're someone who doesn't like to read the passage, or if you just don't have the willpower to peek at the passages that you have to make a choice for. I've been solo gaming for a very long time, so I do this all the time anyways for myself. But yeah, I think these three board games do the best job at trying to mimic video games in a board game format that is still really, really enjoyable. Now, if there's video games and board game pairings that I did not talk about in this game that kind of have a narrative adventure feel that you feel strongly about, you can leave those in the comments below. Maybe I'll come back to this in another video. Or of course, there are different kinds of video games and board game iterations that aren't just narrative heavy. I will pull a Rodney and say, I will let you figure that out on your own. Now have a great night, weekend, day, night, morning, life. Goodbye!